We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
Have you ever struggled to forgive someone in your life for something they did, something they said, how they treated you, how they raised you? How has forgiveness or the lack thereof impacted your life? Hi, my name is Brandon Clift. I'm the host of the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than just one way to be a man. And if this is your first time joining us, this is the show where men come to have courageous conversations, to take off their masks, to talk about the sticky, the icky, the gross, the difficult conversations that are being fought out in the streets and debated on the news. But here, it's no holds bar. We go there, we have those conversations, and we create a space in which men can express, and more importantly, where men can learn about the topic we're talking about, or learn something about themselves. All with the focus and the mission to give men an opportunity to build a relationship, to deepen and strengthen the bond between them and the person they see in the mirror. That's what we do here. And we do that by having conversations like the conversation we're going to have today with the founder of Corbin Seminars, Robert Corbin. Now, Robert is a seasoned veteran of the Mankind Project and men's work as a whole. He's been in it for over 30 years. And in that time, not only has his life profoundly changed because of this work, but he is now, 7 years later, committed to passing on these teachings and these learnings to those that many of us in society have given up on. In this episode, you're going to hear about Robert's work and how he teaches the power of forgiveness to inmates. Going into prisons like San Quentin, Folsom, the Mankind Project has been involved in producing a lot of programs for many men and women that have been given up on by many of the people in their lives and by society as a whole. And through these programs, through teaching these human beings about forgiveness for others, but more importantly, forgiveness for themselves, they're now given a chance to reintegrate back into society. So what does this mean for you? Well, one thing I've learned in my life is that there are very few people I've ever met. I mean, I can't say I know everything, but there's very few people I met who aren't holding on to something that happened to them, something that happened because of someone else's actions, because someone else's intentions. We in life can get hurt. However, it's through forgiveness that we can take the power away from those people, take the power away from those situations, and so that we can let go and shed some weight so that we can move through life with more freedom, with more opportunity, knowing that we're not being tied and shackled by the weight of what it is that we're holding on to. And so it's natural because we're conditioned to blame others for our feelings. However, hopefully in today's interview, you get a chance to take a step back and be able to take ownership for what has happened to you. And I know that's hard to digest, to take ownership for what has happened to you. However, I can't control what someone else does to me, but I can, if I'm conscious enough, control how I react to what someone else does to me. And so today you're going to learn that forgiveness, it's not an emotion, it's a decision. And through this conversation with Rob, you're going to really be able to see and learn how it's our early wounds that paint our world, that colors our world and the way that we move through the world. And today you're going to walk away with some tools to begin to start to forgive not just others, but also perhaps yourself. So you're really going to love this one. Robert is a real treat to converse with, and I think you're going to be deeply inspired by the work he's been able to do and pass on to those that many have given up on. However, here we don't give up on people. We give them a chance. we open the door for them, but it's up to them to go through. So the question is for you. The doors are going to be opened in this interview. Are you prepared to walk through those doors and forgive? Enjoy. So Rob, great to have you here, mate.
Yeah, man, it's good to be here with you, Brandon.
Good to have you. Good to have you. So, mate, I'm really excited to have you on today because I feel like forgiveness is something that is so easy to logically understand, but much harder to execute, right? Easier said than done. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, you're right. You're right. I've been we talked about this a little bit. I've been doing this work for 5 years. Any door that opens for me, I go in. And so I've been in front of groups of people who have voluntarily made the decision that they want to go and learn about forgiveness. And one of the questions that I ask when we first get started is I take account of the number of people in that room who are willing to take ownership of some feelings when it comes to forgiving, either forgiving themselves or forgiving others. And so what I normally start off asking my audience is how many people here are willing to take ownership of one or more of the following feelings. And then I kind of go down the list, which would include hate, anger, bitterness, resentment, anguish, hostility, jealousy, regret, remorse, guilt, shame. And there's probably another slew of words that I could add on to that. And so I ask people, how long or how many of you are willing to take ownership of one or more of those feelings? And Brandon, I'll tell you, over 5 years, most people raise their hand, most. And then, depending on the age of the audience, sometimes I work with seniors, people in their 70s and 80s who come. And then I'll go around the room and say, how long, think back of the origin of when you became emotionally wounded with one or more of these feelings. About how old were you? And what is very common, and this also applies in the prison system, are people that can identify with being emotionally wounded starting at age 5 or 6 or 7.
That's what we say.
Yeah. And, in prison, a lot of men that I facilitate are people in their 30s and 40s, sometimes older, and then seniors. The only difference between the prisoners and working with seniors in a day class is the seniors, instead of owning their stuff for 20 or 30 years, have owned it for 50 or 60 years.
Right.
And so what that led me to understand is that the majority of men and women living in this world, all over this world, are living emotionally wounded. It's just a fact. And it's a sad fact, but it's a fact. Yeah.
Very sad. I mean, you've been involved in the Mankind Project, since 88? Is that correct?
Yeah, I got initiated sometime back in the mid to late 80s. I don't have a handle on when, because I think I lost my certificate. And I do know that a guy by the name of Lester was the main facilitator. I think he's still around.
Ah.
I think he's still around.
Oh, yeah, that's great to hear.
Lester. Yeah. And so I think he was one of the originator, head ponchos on a weekend, a leader. Right. And so it's been 30 plus years. I can safely say 30 plus years.
30 plus years. And so, and as you know, what we find in this work a lot as well, when we take men back and to really learn when we adopt certain behaviors, adopt certain beliefs or judgments or emotional wounds.
Yeah.
It is that 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kind of range, for majority of the cases.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But first, before we get into that, Rob, I want to get a better understanding of yourself. How does someone like yourself get into, 5 years now of working in prisons, teaching our inmates how to, learn, get out of their emotional cages?
So ask me the question again, just so I'm clear on it. I want to give you a good answer.
Yeah, I'll simplify it. How did you end up in this work?
All right, that's cool. Yeah, so my own personal experience.
Mm.
So I became emotionally wounded at the age of 6. And by the way, I want to tell you that I'm 67. So we're talking about over 60 years, Brendan. So I was emotionally wounded at the age of 6. My dad was a young father, and he didn't have the experience and the wisdom to really know all the ands, ifs, and buts on how to be a good dad. And, one day some trauma happened in my life of being the recipient of some extreme discipline. And it was abuse. Anybody that I would share my story with would certainly recognize it as extreme abuse. So I made a decision as a 6-year-old that I'm never going to forgive my dad. Screw him. And even though I was 6, I was old enough to understand something about myself. And what I learned is that I don't want to be wounded again. I don't ever want to be wounded in the way that I was wounded. So I built what I refer to in my work as an emotional cage. And so what lived in that cage with me for 4 years was anger and resentment and bitterness. And it was by choice. I made the decision to have those feelings in order to protect myself emotionally from being wounded again. And I got to tell you that what I'm sharing with you is very, very common among not just men in prison, but men and women. I've worked with women prisoners as well, and they have the same wounds we do.
Mm.
It's from a different experience, but they have the same wounds that we do. So,
Right.
So I decided after I finally figured out how to forgive that I would share my journey with other people. And one of the things that I learned very early on when I really came to this transformation in my life where I was able to leave that stuff behind is that at the end of the day, forgiving is a decision. Forgiving is not a feeling, it's a decision. And so for the past 5 years, I've been helping people come to a place and a moment in their lives where they can make a better decision.
Mm.
And that is to become emotionally free, because the truth is we're allowed to be emotionally free from the past. It's not a life sentence. Anger and bitterness and resentment and hate and shame and guilt and remorse and all that stuff, it's not a life sentence.
Right.
Nobody told us that we're supposed to take that to our grave.
Mm.
And so, the $1 million question that I always ask people is, when is enough enough? How much longer are we supposed to hold on to our stuff for?
It's dragging it up a mountain.
And so, So that's what kind of led me, my own journey, my own experience led me to find another purpose in my life. And so I retired from the business world, and I said, hey, you know what? Financially, I'm okay. I'm cool. So I retired and decided that, I'm going to just do this for a living. Mm. And I'll tell you what, man, without expanding and taking up all this time on this podcast with just me talking, but I do want to say this, and that is that I get a much bigger paycheck doing what I do than I ever got in the business world.
Yeah. And
it's not money. It's just people telling me how important it was for them to be able to learn how to leave their emotional cage. And so I consider myself a lot more successful now than I ever was in the business world. In the business world, I did pretty good for myself. So, yeah.
That's fantastic, Rob. It's interesting. You mentioned before that, forgiveness is a choice, not a feeling, and it's a decision. And it's like, you as a 6-year-old, after getting abuse from your father, it's like you made the decision to send the walls up. Like I'm making a decision. Sometimes those decisions, in my experience and what I've seen, are unconscious, right? That they're not something that can be put, clearly to words, but it's that choice. And I think, do you think the same thing occurs with forgiveness, that someone does something to me and I might not be able to explain it, but a part of my subconscious is going to hold on to that negative association or feeling to that person, and so I can continue just to add it to the balls and chains that I'm already dragging.
So here's the deal. We are preconditioned as human beings to hold others responsible for our feelings. It's the way that we've been taught. It's the way that we've learned. It's the way that we've been brought up. It's the way that we've been shown by example from those who are in charge of mentoring us and nurturing us and loving us, usually our parents. So we've become preconditioned as a society to blame others for our feelings because they hurt us emotionally. They said or did something that really affected us. Mm. And, one of the things that I teach is that we're not robots. And if somebody says something that really pisses us off, we're not capable of letting it deflect right off of us and never feeling the effect, because there's a universal law called the law of cause and effect. For every cause, there's an effect. So we're not robots. But here's the deal, Brandon. For us to make the decision to hold on to whatever those feelings are for months, years, or even decades is a choice. Mm. And we become the victim. So, we talk about power in the Mankind Project. This is a prime example of us giving away our power as a man and giving it to the perpetrator and handing it to them on a silver platter when we hold on to being pissed off or resentful against someone else. Yeah. You know what? They ended up winning and we ended up losing because they're not waking up every day pissed off. Yep. We are. So we become the victim. Mm-hmm. So there's another way to look at forgiveness, and that is this. There's a long-term reaction and a short-term reaction. Short-term reaction is what I call the initial response. You something in my face that I don't like, I'm pissed off at you. But for me to hold on to that for more than a day, you become the one that took away my power. Mm-hmm. And it was by choice. Yeah. Because forgiving is a decision. It's not a feeling. So there's a lot of wounded men out there that are holding on to stuff for decades. And so the first thing that we have to understand is that no one is responsible for our long-term feelings. No one except for us. Now, short-term feelings, yeah. But you know what? I kind of came up in my own mind with this rule called the 24-hour rule. I'll be pissed off for 24 hours, but you don't deserve me being pissed off at you for any more than 24 hours, because then I have become a victim and I don't want to be a victim. So, we got to think of this in a different way.
Well, and the chimpanzee in me gets excited when I hear that, because it gives the pissed offness some credence. It's like, yeah, I'm angry. You did this thing and I'm angry, but now I need to take responsibility of my reaction. Right.
That's right.
And sometimes it's nice to act like a chimp and, hit things and, whatever. Right. But I like that. The 24-hour rule. I think that's a nifty one, because any longer after that, you're just allowing them to play a starring role in your future. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I ask people, this question, and you have to ask these questions to kind of find your way through and unlock the emotional cage. Are we deserving as men to be emotionally free from the past? More specifically, are we deserving to wake up every day with peace and contentment in our life? And I believe that it's a God-given power for us to have the tools to make a decision to live in peace and contentment. Right. There's too many people going to their graves with all this stuff that they lived with all their life needlessly, when they had the ability to let it go.
Right. It's a crying shame, isn't it? Crying shame. So,
Yeah.
Rob, I want to ask you, why prisons? Why the prison system? Why is that your area of focus right now?
Yeah. Well, I have a captive audience. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of no shows. There's not a lot of people that said I couldn't make it because I had something else going on.
Yeah.
I get word that there's 20 people that are going to be attending. There's pretty much 20 people who are there.
Wow.
And I'll tell you the other thing. All right, on the outside world, there's a lot of resources out there for, doing some work, inner work. There's therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. There's MKP. There's a lot of choices we have for getting support.
If you're enjoying the Mankind podcast, how about taking another step? This one takes some courage, and you've got it. Check out the Men's Work Introduction. It's 3 sessions over 3 weeks. New sessions start every month, and we even have a cohort tailored to LGBTQ men, which you can learn more about at bit.ly/menswork2.
The prison system is not a place that you're going to get the kind of support when it comes to forgiving and doing men's work. Now, I got to tell you that in the prison system today, I'm a former inmate, and I make no shame about that. I mean, it's just a way of life. That was back over 30 years ago, but the prison system has really changed. There are a lot of resources today for prisoners when it comes to religious freedom, when it comes to AA, NA, and groups like that for addiction. But there's not much going on in the prison system for men's work, for carpet work.
Yeah.
And the carpet is brought into the prison system. I mean, we do carpet work in the prison system.
For those listening, carpet work refers to work that we do in our men's circles and work that we do on our New Warrior trainings and other high-level trainings that essentially allows a man to work on whatever's alive and present in them. And or if it's not alive and present, help bring it up so that they can. So, yeah, for those that aren't as familiar with kind of men's work, that's what carpet work means when we refer to
it. Yeah, and I refer to it is where men have an opportunity to own their deepest truth. And I'd like to just say another word around that. I believe that in order for us to move forward in our life emotionally, we have to take a step back. We have to take a step back and put all of our stuff in front of us so that we can see authentically all that stuff, negative stuff that we're living with. It's sort of like the ability to emotionally take that shadow part of us, that part that in MKP we talk about that we repress or deny or ignore, and take it out of us and put it in front of us so we can see it clearly. Because in order for us to move forward, we have to take a step back. And taking a step back in regards to the work that I do and MKP does is to own our stuff first. So we have to look within and say, you know what, I need to own this stuff. I need to acknowledge it. I need to take ownership of it for me to be able to move forward.
Yeah.
So I call that taking a step back, and taking a step back is carpet work. That's what I call it, carpet work. That's when the carpet comes out and men get a chance to be their authentic selves and own their truth.
And, it's I love that you mentioned ownership. Something one of my mentors taught me, he's a full leader, Larry Dawson in Australia, is ownership really is just owning the shit.
Yeah.
There's ownership and then there's own the shit. And own the shit is.
Yeah. And you know what? We're not often willing to look within to own our shit.
No, because it's your fault, Rob. It's your fault that I'm feeling.
Right. Yeah. So it's so easy to blame others. And so the first step is to recognize it, own it, and then to make a decision. And the decision, I call it the $1 million question, is when is enough enough? Because you know what? Somebody that's owned emotional stuff for 15 or 20 years, in my judgment, that's too long. We don't deserve to be holding on to that stuff for 15 or 20 years or 30 years, or like myself, 46 years.
Wow. And so you've given us a framework here: recognize it, own it, make a decision around it. The $1 million question. What do you think is the biggest thing that gets in the way of men, women, children being able to actually forgive? Because I mean, it's taught in scripture, right? That, you know, that forgiveness is next to something else. I don't know. It's been a while, but you know, they always talk about forgiveness, and I think again we logically can see the benefit of forgiveness. But what do you think is the number one thing that really trips up the most people when it comes to actually forgiving?
Buying into their story.
Right.
And I need to explain that to you.
So if I forgive you, I take away the story I've been telling myself for 47 years.
Well, and here's another thing, Brandon, a whole new unmasking here when it comes to forgiveness is forgiving ourselves. There's a lot of men out there. In fact, going back to when I go into prisons, you know, I ask the inmates individually a question: who needs to be forgiven first? Who's number one on the list, yourself or someone else? In most cases, it's themselves. And then we do what's called the check-in, which you're familiar with. And we go around the room and I ask people, well, when it comes to forgiving yourself, what words can you take ownership of that apply to you when it comes to forgiving yourself? Shame, remorse, regret, guilt. So, you know, they have remorse and shame for stuff that happened when they were kids, because they bought into the story from their dads or their moms that, you know, that you're a piece of shit, excuse the expression, or you'll never amount to anything, or I'm sorry you were ever born, or not being there during their deepest needs, and abandonment. I mean, that's a really, really big issue. So a lot of people have shame because they feel unworthy, because they bought in to the story when they were young by their parents or whoever brought them up, that they're not worthy because they weren't there for them during their deepest needs. And so they bought into the story, and for whatever reason, they made a decision to not work on that and let that permeate with them through their lives, even though now they have the wisdom to say, you know what, I'm a good person. I don't need to be living with that shame or guilt or remorse. They haven't taken positive measures. And when I say positive measures, let me lay the context. This is a 6 to 7 hour program.
Yeah.
It's a program I developed, and we go through a step-by-step systematic process where towards the end, every man gets an opportunity to make a decision. When is enough? And they also have to take ownership of that gold, that part of them that they don't often recognize, like they're a loving person, they're compassionate, they're a good listener, they're a good husband, they're a good father. And so, you know, the shame can cloud the authentic who they are, because some people forget that who they were is not who they are.
Yeah.
There can be a difference between who you were and who you are. So what I tell people is we can't live in two places at one time. You can't live in the past with all that stuff and be fully present in the present and live with peace and contentment. You just can't do it. Can't live in two places at one time. Can't do it.
Yeah. And we see that all the time, don't we? I'm peaceful. I'm content. I love everyone. You know, these people that seem to float through the door, and then you hear them just scream because they've got road rage or something, or they, you know, or they you bring up someone's name and they start slandering them. And you can see it's that process of going from one mask to the other of, oh, I am so zen right now. You take that away and they're fuming on something against someone. What I want to know, Rob, is, mate, so you're 67.
Yeah.
You've been in this work, you know, deep work since the 80s. You've had the experience of going to prison.
Yeah.
And then and then you've been doing this work for 5 years. I want to ask you whether there's like an example or a story, or, you know, someone that comes to mind, or just from your heart. Tell me, what is it about this that really just lights your soul on fire? Because I can feel it just as I'm talking to you.
Well, thank you, man. Thank you. Well, I want to tell you, you know, when you hear some of these stories, you want to cry. Some of the stories are truly surreal to hear. They're unfathomable. You just can't really have a grasp that this really happened, but it did. But it did. A lot of these men are wounded in ways that made my trauma, much less degree than what they've endured. I mean, that I look and I say, man, what happened to me? Shit, that was a piece of cake compared to listen to this guy. And so I've built up a wall myself when I'm doing the work. The wall comes down when I'm not doing the work, and I get letters from prisoners and other people who have attended my program. And I'll tell you that there's something that I have to have very close by when I read these letters, and that's a box of Kleenex. Because, man, oh man, you hear about these men who have woken up and they are breathing fresh air for the first time in 30 or 40 years. And I mean that symbolically, by being who they really deserve to be for the first time, because they were given permission to own their gold and that part of them that really makes them who they are and not who they were. And they've been living with who they were and not who they are. And the release from that and getting these letters, it just, like I said, I mean, that's how I get paid. I pay on my own dime. I go to Oregon. I live in Phoenix, and I get on airplanes and travel to Oregon, and I drive to California a lot. And I pay for my own, hotels and gas and food and stuff. And so that's how I'm, spending my retirement savings, I guess you could say. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, man, the paycheck I get in return, reading these letters, you know what, I would pay out of my pocket to continue to do this work. Unfortunately, I don't. I mean, the prisons don't pay me, but if I had to pay the prisons to do this work, I would still do it. It's addicting because you're helping other people. And let me tell you, I wasn't that way when I grew up. I was kind of a self-serving, selfish person. And it took the passing of my father to realize that 46 years were wasted. And that I really need to be the kind of person that authentically I can be. And I got to give credit to Mankind Project because, had I not done my own work, I wouldn't have been able to do this work.
Wow.
So, I mean, a lot of it was stuff I created, but the basic foundation is what I learned on the carpet with MKP.
Beautiful, Rob. What's coming to me is when you open a man's heart, doors open. And who knew this journey? 30 years later, look what you're doing.
Oh, man.
And,
yeah, I'm loving it.
I feel like it's very easy for someone like myself or you or others, or maybe not yourself, outsiders who have never experienced, a different way of being brought up or having been through the prison system. Right. It's very natural for someone like me to consciously go, oh, they did a bad thing, lock them up, don't want to see them again. But there's a human being in there that may have adopted a belief system or a mindset or raised in an environment that was conducive to the behaviors that got them in there.
Well, let me say this. Yeah, I call it born in hell. There's a lot of men in there who were born in hell. They were born without the basic necessities that we as human beings have to have in our lives to grow up to be good people. And that is love and care and nurturing and compassion and understanding and guidance. Yeah. And a lot of these men, I mean, I'm saying the majority did not have this. Yeah. So they were born in hell. They were born in a jungle. And to escape the jungle, the first thing that they needed as men were to be accepted. Yeah. And, the first place they found acceptance was on the streets.
On the streets. Gang cultures.
Yeah, gang cultures, and doing stuff that broke the law, and then they paid the consequence.
Yeah.
Now that they're in prison, as much as I don't believe that these sentences are fair, I just got to tell you for a minute my deeper truth from being in prisons for 5 years, and the inmates will agree with me that prison represented a moment in their lives that was the first time for most of these men that they had structure, that
Yeah.
they were given the rules to be able to live by, to do good as men. They never learned these skills on the street. They never learned them from their parents. They learn them from prison. And I'm not suggesting that prison is the way to go. If you need some guidance, check yourself into a prison. But I am saying that these men have realized who they are and what they can do and what they were meant to do by being in a structured environment. And that's what prison gave them to some degree, which they needed. Now, again, I want to say a lot of these men are there for way too long. But that's something that we have no control over. But let me tell you, most of these men, believe it or not, most of these men, and I've been in prisons where guys are doing life without parole. Most of these men, I would have no hesitation inviting them over for dinner, really and truly. And I say that just because these men have changed their lives. They have structure. They know what they need to do. And they truly want to be good people.
Yeah.
They just didn't have any guidance, man. They didn't have anybody to hold their hand and take them through this road of life.
Yeah.
And so there is a benefit in having structure in their life. Unfortunately, it came with them being in prison, but the fact is it did happen.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, Rob, I am grateful that there are men like yourself on this planet that are taking the time to give these men an opportunity to own their stories, own their shadows, own those emotional wounds, as well as give them the tools and the structure to move through it and to come out the other side. Because I'm telling you, many would think, oh, it's too late for them, but not you. It's never too late.
You know what? Let me tell you, man, it's never too late. I mean, just think about the Mankind Project weekend. I don't know if you've experienced this, but I have as a staff member, men coming through that are in their 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
So it's never too late. Never too late. Man.
Never too late. That's it. Beautiful, brother. Beautiful. Well, mate, you've got a mission. It's clear. And I want to ask you, how can we as a community support you and your mission? I'm telling you right now, if I'm ever in your neck of the woods or we happen to be in the same area during one of these programs, I will move hell and high water to be on there for 7 hours or however long the commitment is to be there with you and experience this for myself. But outside of that, how else can we support you?
Well, there's two ways. One, there's no secrets about what I do, and there's a need for other men in the prison system. I'm working with some prisons in Arizona, California, and Oregon. That's 3 states out of 51. So, there's a lot of states and a lot of room for this work to be done. And I'm, rather than supporting me, I'd like to offer my support to anybody who's listening, who's thinking, man, oh man, this is something that I might be interested in doing. I have the time, I have the desire. So I'd like to just offer up my contact information. And the other thing is, I'm trying to reach a level in my own journey here that one day I can be a paid speaker.
Yeah.
And hold groups, and people are willing to come to those groups. So I was told that I really need to get a lot of likes on my Facebook page and get a lot of action going on in social media, which I really haven't been due to my lack of technical skills. So I'd like to just give people my contact information. If they're interested in doing what I do, I'm happy to share that information. And minimally, if they're willing to give me some likes on my Facebook page, I was told that I need that in order to be more credible if I ever want to be a paid speaker one day, which is the ultimate goal.
Fantastic. Well, mate, we'll do our best to support you in that. We'll put those links up in ways that we can support you on this journey. The one thing I'll leave you with is if you get a Patreon account going, then we'll be able to send some change your way as a community individually. So
I appreciate that. I never asked for money, and just when you do stuff from the heart, the rewards come back.
That's it, brother. That's it, brother. Awesome, mate. I'm going to get you to hang on the line. For the rest of you that have been joining us this evening, thank you very much for joining us for this deeply insightful episode with Rob Corbin. Mate, I'm just really blown away by the passion, by the commitment that you put into this work.
Thank
And
you.
not only just inspiring for someone like myself, I've got a couple more steps to take on this planet, but for those that are retiring and that are looking for ways in which to direct their energy, their care, and their hearts, the work can still continue. There's still ways to give back to this world outside of monetary gains or means. And so,
Amen.
Beautiful stuff. Awesome. You hang on, Rob. Okay, guys, next week I will be on the road. It might be me, it might be Boyson, but we will possibly be having a guest coming your way. So I look forward to we connect next time. Lots of love, and we'll see you later. This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. I have been your host, Brandon Clift, and I personally want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. Special thanks, of course, goes to my incredible team, Marketing and Communications Director Boyson Hodgson, producer and editor of this episode, Michael Russo, who makes me sound so much more intelligent than I actually am, so of course, special kudos goes there. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.